At dawn, amid the towering pines of Oregon, a German Shepherd puppy lay trapped wire biting into his leg, his fur tangled with rain and old blood. His survival seemed impossible. From a ridge trail near Camp Valor, a Marine heard a single fractured cry and moved without hesitation. 2 lives, one scarred by war, the other wounded by a cruel trap, were about to collide and forever change each other's fate. What unfolded was a rescue that felt like a rebirth, the kind of second chance you never expect until it saves you whole. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, drop your country in the comments. And if you believe no soul, human or animal, should ever be left behind, hit subscribe. This story just might restore your belief in true miracles. Morning mist wove softly through the pines outside Bend, Oregon, cloaking the forest in a silvery hush. The air bit cold and sharp, heavy with the scent of wet bark and melting snow. Birds slept on the mountain silence, deep and almost sacred, until a faint, fragile sound shattered the quiet. Marcus Hale slowed his steps, boots crunching over frost-hardened pine needles. At 36, Marcus was a Marine, tempered by relentless trials. Years of service carved quiet lines around his eyes, not from age, but from endurance. His face bore the steady calm of a man who had witnessed too much and spoke too little. Broad-shouldered, unyielding, he moved with the deliberate grace of a man used to carrying both burden and duty. That morning his field uniform was already speckled with mud from the rugged trek. Yet beneath his composed exterior lay a restless spirit, a soldier still learning how to find peace. The sound came again, low, broken, unhuman. Marcus paused. The strained whimper rose between gusts of wind, then faded to silence. Instinct overruled thought. He slipped silently off the trail into the densest shadows of the forest. His breath steamed in the cold air as he tracked the sound for 50 yards until he saw it. A tiny figure huddled at the base of a fallen tree, trembling and snared in rusted wire. It was a German Shepherd puppy, barely 4 months old, its coat a muddy blend of black and tan, slick with rain and grime. Its right hind leg was grotesquely twisted and snared in barbed fencing. Blood stained its fur dark against the pale snow. The pup made no noise, didn't flinch when Marcus knelt beside it. It simply looked up with wide, pleading eyes, amber glassy from fear and exhaustion. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus whispered, voice gentle but steady. "You picked one hell of a place to hide." He dropped his pack, drew his knife, and began to free the pup. The wire bit deep, cutting flesh with every twist. The puppy whimpered with each loosening turn, but never bit or struggled, just trembled, placing blind trust in this stranger. The snow beneath them stained pink with diluted blood as the wind stirred, carrying hints of rain and pine sap. Marcus's breath came in short bursts. He spoke softly to the pup as he worked, words soldiers used to steady their own hearts. "You're going to be all right. Stay still. I've got you." Blood soaked through his gloves where the barbs tore leather, but he pressed on until the final loop snapped free and the tiny leg slipped clear. The pup collapsed, panting, chest heaving. Marcus swaddled it in his jacket, pressing a steady hand against its side. Its heartbeat faint, but alive, he glanced down at the snare, half buried under grime and fallen leaves. A ruthless relic from someone's long-forgotten trap. His jaw clenched tight. He'd seen traps before, but never aimed at creatures this small. "Someone really did you wrong, didn't they?" he murmured gently. The pup whimpered softly, eyes flickering shut. Marcus drew it closer, feeling the fragile rhythm of its breath press against his ribs. A sharp gust rolled through, sending a chill racing down his spine. The forest held a hushed silence after suffering, like the still moments following a firefight where only breaths and disbelief remain. He adjusted his hold on the fragile bundle and rose. The weight was negligible, yet felt far heavier than any rucksack he had ever carried. His boots squelched in the mud as he stepped back toward the trail, the metallic tang of damp iron rising from his gloves. The pup's head nestled beneath his chin, eyes sealed in quiet trust. The scene stirred something deep inside him. Valor, the name, flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning, slicing through dense fog. Valor had been his canine partner in Helmand Province, an aging German shepherd trained sharp in detection and patrol. Together, they had crossed minefields, searched collapsed ruins, and shared foxholes beneath skies ablaze with relentless heat. Then one dawn, a roadside blast ripped the earth apart beneath them. Marcus survived. Valor did not. That guilt never eased. Even now, years later, it shadowed him silent, patient, unyielding. He gazed down at the trembling puppy in his arms. Its fur was matted and dirt-streaked heart still trembling, but its breath steadied. The resemblance was haunting, the same muzzle slope, the same dark saddle over its back. "Guess fate's got a twisted sense of humor," he murmured. By the time Marcus reached the edge of the training field, fog had thickened into a soft, persistent drizzle. Below the base stretched in muted tones barracks' storage huts, the low buzz of generators awakening with the dawn. A flag flapped listlessly over the parade ground. Private Riker, one of the younger Marines, was jogging toward the mess hall when he spotted Marcus emerging from the tree line. "Sergeant Hale," he called, easing to a stop, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Sir, what the hell's that?" Marcus tightened the jacket around the bundle in his arms. "A rescue." Riker blinked rain dripping from his cap. "It's alive. Barely. I'm getting Doc Collins." Lieutenant Sarah Collins ran the veterinary and medical division at Camp Valor, a quiet woman in her mid-30s with the patience of a saint and the gaze of someone who'd witnessed too many animals slip away to still trust in miracles. Tall and lean, with sandy blonde hair pulled into a stern bun, gray eyes that missed nothing, and hands that balanced precision with tenderness. Her calm was forged in loss after losing her younger brother in a base explosion overseas. Since then, she had invested every shred of grief into saving what could still be saved, man or beast alike. When Marcus stepped into the clinic, antiseptic and damp fur filled the air. Sarah glanced up from a file, noticed the blood-streaked jacket, and frowned. "Another stray found him tangled in barbed wire near the ridge," Marcus replied, gently laying the pup on the table. Sarah snapped on gloves and inspected the wound. "The infection's deep. Whoever set that trap didn't consider mercy." Her tone softened. "He's a shepherd, maybe 4 months old. You really want to keep him here? Regulations are strict." Marcus met her steady gaze. "He deserves a shot. Just fix him up. I'll take care of the rest." A flicker crossed her face, neither full agreement nor outright defiance. After a moment's pause, she gave a slow nod. "All right then, but if he pulls through, he's on your hands. That's just how I want it." She gently began tending the wound. The pup twitched, never struggling. Marcus stood silently beside her, watching intently. Rain pattered against the tin roof like a soft, steady applause. "You talk to him?" Sarah asked without lifting her gaze. "Yeah, it calms the fear a bit. Yours or his?" He offered a half smile. "Both, I suppose." For the next hour, the clinic was a quiet world of calm dedication, the lamps hum, the subtle clink of metal instruments, and the gentle, steady breath of a creature caught between agony and survival. When Sarah finally wrapped the leg, the pup slipped into a shallow sleep, a faint twitch at its nose. "He'll make it," she said, pulling off her gloves. "If infection doesn't take hold, he might even walk again." Marcus exhaled softly, a sound somewhere between relief and hope. "Nice work, Doc." Sarah crossed her arms. "Save your thanks until he pulls through the night." Marcus crouched by the table, running a hand over the pup's head. The fur was coarse beneath his palm, warm despite the chill. "You're safe now, little one," he whispered. The pup stirred a faint whine slipping from its throat. For the first time that morning, Marcus smiled, a small, genuine curve that reached his eyes but was gone too soon. Outside, the rain softened to mist. Pine swayed, whispering in the breeze like an ancient hymn. Inside the clinic, under dim yellow light, a Marine and a wounded pup shared a fragile silence. The silence that arrives when the worst has passed, and the faintest glimmer of hope takes root. Marcus stood stretched, aching shoulders and eyed the window where the forest faded into gray. Mud still stuck to his boots, blood marred his gloves, and a storm churned in his chest. Yet in that moment the world shifted, felt less empty, less cold. He turned back to Sarah, who was already jotting notes onto a clipboard. "Keep him warm," he said quietly. "He's got fight in him. Reminds me of someone." Sarah glanced up, a wry smile tugging at her lip. "You mean yourself, probably." Marcus pulled his jacket tighter, ready to step away. He paused at the doorway, rain sparkling on the brim of his cap. "Doc," he said, "thank you." She didn't look away. "Don't thank me just yet. Hail the stubborn ones who refuse to quit." He stepped out into the drizzle. Behind him, the door closed softly, with a thud. The forest waited beyond the fence, its breath unwavering, ancient and patient. Marcus walked toward the barracks, the faint rhythm of the pup's breathing still echoing in his mind. Unbeknownst to him, that fragile pulse, the quiet, steady beat of life that refused to falter, would become the spark that changed everything. Rain had cloaked Camp Valor in a gray veil by the time Marcus left the clinic. The pines bowed beneath the weight of the storm, their branches dripping their shadows soft in the mist. The base was hushed. Only the gentle hum of generators and the steady drum of rain on corrugated roofs disturbed the stillness. Marcus splashed through puddles heading toward the barracks, his soaked jacket heavy, his thoughts even heavier. Inside the veterinary wing, Lieutenant Sarah Collins watched the door close behind him, then turned her attention back to the small figure resting on the steel table. The German Shepherd pup shifted faintly under the wool blanket. Its breathing was shallow but steady, the fever slowly easing with every dose of the antibiotics she had given. She exhaled quietly, massaging the back of her neck. This wasn't the first time a wounded soldier had been placed under her care, but it was the first time in many months she had seen that kind of silent desperation reflected in Hale's eyes. Sarah had known Marcus nearly 2 years now since he'd been reassigned to Camp Valor's logistics and training unit. He was one of those Marines who spoke sparingly, but when he did, every word carried weight. The others respected him. Even if whispers about his past clung to him, Afghanistan, the loss of a K-9 partner, a commendation he never mentioned, Sarah understood the power of silence. She'd been living in it ever since her brother, a field medic, had been killed in an explosion near Kandahar. The grief hollowed something deep inside her, yet it also forged a fierce resolve. She had become the steadfast guardian of any life still clinging on. She pulled a stool close and sat beside the cage. "You're one of the lucky ones," she murmured softly to the pup. "He won't ever quit on you." The puppy's eyes fluttered open, amber, flecked with rich gold. It blinked once, then drifted back into a dreamy half-sleep. Sarah's lips curled in a faint smile, stubborn just like him. Dawn broke pale and damp the next morning. Mist rose from the gravel as the early sun fought through heavy clouds. Marcus arrived at the clinic before Revely, carrying a thermos filled with black coffee and a small bundle of jerky wrapped carefully in paper. Sarah was already there, her hair bound tighter than usual, a lab coat thrown over her fatigues. "You don't waste any time," she said without lifting her gaze. "Couldn't sleep," Marcus replied, setting the thermos down gently. "How's he holding up?" Sarah gestured toward the corner where a small cage rested beneath a warming lamp. Inside, the pup cleaned bandaged, swaddled in a worn towel, breathed slow and steady, its chest rising and falling with quiet determination. Better than last night, though still fragile. Marcus crouched beside the cage, resting an arm on his knee. The pup stirred at his voice, lifting its head with effort. "Hey there," Soldier Marcus murmured, still hanging in. It blinked at him, then released a soft sound, a mixture of a whine and a sigh. Sarah leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Planning to keep him, Marcus shrugged. "Depends if he chooses to stay." "That's not how it works, Hale. Dogs don't get to make the call." He looked up at her. "Sure they do. They just don't need words to say it." Sarah said nothing more. She'd seen how the pup's gaze followed Marcus the moment he entered the room. By midday, the rain had eased into a gentle drizzle. Marcus had paperwork waiting at the motor pool, but his thoughts kept wandering back to the clinic. After lunch, he returned, carrying a small metal bowl filled with a few strips of boiled chicken pilfered from the mess hall. Corporal Nate Riker, a mechanic in his early 30s, saw him through the open door. Riker was compact and broad-shouldered, with grease-stained hands and a grin that could soften even the toughest officers. "Sir?" he called out, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Is that the mutt you found yesterday?" "Not a mutt," Marcus corrected. "German Shepherd. Pretty sharp, too." Riker peered inside, whistling softly. "Looks half dead. Marcus, he's halfway back now." Riker tapped the door with a grin. "You're getting soft, Sarge." Marcus returned a dry smile. "Don't tell anyone." Riker chuckled as he walked toward the garage. His laughter lingered a warm slice of normal in their world. Inside, Sarah was putting the finishing touches on her notes. "You're back," she said. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised, worried," he replied. "You have other responsibilities." Marcus knelt before the cage, setting the bowl down. The pup sniffed the air cautiously, then began eating in slow, deliberate bites. "He needs someone to watch over him. He has me," Sarah assured. "What he really needs is someone to believe he'll pull through." Sarah stayed silent, eyes fixed on the pup as it finished eating and nudged Marcus's hand gently with its nose. A small gesture, yet it was the first flicker of Will's spirit she'd witnessed. That night the weather shifted once more. The rain fell steady, drumming a soft rhythm on the tin roof. Marcus had been dismissed after hours, but instead of heading back to the barracks, he returned to the clinic with an old military blanket. Sarah was locking up when she spotted him. "Hail," she greeted, her exasperation melting into a smile. "You know animals don't have visiting hours, right?" "Then I'm not visiting. I'm volunteering. You're impossible." He gave a faint smile. "I've heard that before." She hesitated, then gave in. "Fine, but keep it quiet." Marcus moved to the cage's far corner. He carefully opened it, lifted the tiny body, and laid it down on the folded blanket beside his cot. The pup whimpered softly, then curled up, tucking its nose against his boot. Sarah stayed near the door, watching. "You follow orders in a strange way, Sergeant. Only the ones worth following." She almost smiled before stepping away and leaving him to his vigil. Hours slipped by. The storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the window, casting pale blue shadows across the room. Marcus sat on the floor beside the pup, one hand resting gently on its side, feeling the rhythm of its breath. His mind drifted to Valor once more. The dust, the scorching heat, the blast that had shattered the desert and swallowed sound in its wake. The guilt lingered, buried deep inside, but the faint pulse beneath his palm somehow quieted it. When thunder roared overhead, the puppy flinched, trembling hard. Marcus leaned in closer. "Easy now," he murmured. "It's just noise. You're safe." He pulled the blanket snug around it. The pup shifted, resting its head against his boot, letting out a soft sigh. He chuckled quietly. "You're tougher than most Marines I know." The words slipped out before he realized he'd spoken them. They hung faintly in the air, soft yet unwavering. The rain softened to a gentle whisper. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and damp fur. Outside, the world was cold and cloaked in darkness. But inside, beneath the steady hum of the heater, a fragile warmth began to grow not from comfort, but from companionship. Sarah returned near dawn, drawn by the pale light filtering through the window. She found Marcus asleep on the floor, his back against the wall. The pup sprawled across his leg like a living shadow. She paused, taking in the scene, and something inside her eased, a reminder that even fractured souls can find one another. She didn't wake him. Instead, she quietly adjusted the heat lamp, checked the bandage, and whispered, "Stay strong, little one. You've got the right Marine watching over you." Outside, the first light spread through the clouds, turning the rain to shimmering silver threads. Inside, the pup's breath deepened, For the first time since the rescue, it slept without shivering. 3 weeks passed under relentless Oregon rain. The forest beyond Camp Valor began to thaw, pine branches dripping with melted frost. The muddy trails exhaled softly beneath the shy caress of early spring's gentle warmth. Life at the base settled into its familiar rhythm. Once again, morning drills, engines humming in harmony, mingling with the sharp scent of gun oil and the rich awakening aroma of coffee. Yet for Marcus Hale, the world had quietly shifted. Each dawn, before the first light kissed the Cascades, he made his way to the veterinary wing. Inside the sterile room, under the comforting glow of a heat lamp and the low static from a radio, the German Shepherd pup waited patiently. Its leg, once tightly swathed in gauze, was mending. Its coat had thickened, soft and lush again. A jet-black saddle draped over tan fur ears now standing tall, with a hesitant but growing pride. The faint scar etched along its hind leg was no longer a sign of surrender, but a testament to resilience. Marcus leaned silently in the doorway, coffee warming his hand. "Morning, Scout," he murmured gently. The name had fallen naturally just a few days before when the pup, still shaky on his feet, had doggedly trailed him halfway across the yard during exercises, undeterred by shouted commands until Sarah had to scoop him up and carry him back. The name stuck fast. Scout lifted his head-tail, thumping softly against the towel. Eyes now sharp amber flames, no longer dulled by pain, lighting up at Marcus's arrival. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, standing nearby by the counter, smiled quietly. "He waits for you every morning," she said, jotting notes on her clipboard. "I swear his ears perk up the moment he hears your footsteps before I do." Marcus smiled. "Guess loyalty's his strongest instinct." Sarah raised an inquisitive brow. "That's pretty rich coming from you." She wasn't wrong. Marcus had always carried duty like armor, unyielding, weighty, and unbreakable. But lately his mornings felt strangely lighter, his pace easing as he left the clinic. Scout had rewritten the tempo of his days without asking for permission. By the 3rd week, Scout was standing solidly, and Sarah started allowing brief, supervised walks outside. Marcus treated it like a mission. Each afternoon, after the drills, he'd fasten a makeshift leash to the pup's collar and guide him carefully across the gravel yard toward the old supply sheds. Scout limped at first, but adapted his gait unsteady yet fiercely determined. Dogs in the distance barked at them from the base, and Scout would pause, ears pricked, curious but calm. "Stay focused, soldier," Marcus whispered under his breath. Once as they crossed the main yard, Sergeant David Hull, the base's veteran K-9 officer, stopped them. Hull was in his 50s, broad-shouldered with silver stubble, framing a voice deep and clear enough to cut through static. His uniform smelled faintly of tobacco and training powder. "Is that the pup you pulled out of the woods?" he asked, eyes sharp and practiced as they studied Scout. "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "One stubborn survivor." Hull crouched down, extending his hand. Scout sniffed it cautiously, tail wagging slow and steady. "He's got a few gifts," Hull said with a knowing smile. Thinking of keeping him, Marcus shrugged. "I guess he made that decision for me." The older man chuckled. "Watch yourself, Sergeant. The ones that pick you, those are the ones who stay with you forever." That truth clung to Marcus deeper than he imagined. Nights weren't the same anymore. The barracks, once filled with silence, and the relentless pulse of restless souls felt different. Marcus had been one of those, awake long past lights-out mind, haunted by sand sirens and the haunting bark of a fallen K-9. But now, exhaustion came more naturally. Scout would be leaving the clinic after just 2 more days. Sarah handed Marcus a small packet of antibiotics and a folded note with careful feeding instructions. "He'll need patience routine, and someone who doesn't mind the break of dawn," she said softly, honoring the unshakable bond between them. She said, "I think we've got this covered," Marcus replied with resolve. That night he led Scout back to his quarters, an old supply cabin reworked into a humble sleeping space. The scent of metal and detergent lingered faintly in the air. Rain tapped rhythmically against the window pane. Scout padded through the room nose low, sniffing every corner like he was charting new terrain. As Marcus sat down on the cot to pull off his boots, Scout paused at the doorway, casting a glance towards the window, where the wind shook the frame. Then without hesitation he padded over and settled by Marcus's feet. His fur brushed warmly against Marcus's leg, soft, warm, and unwavering. "Planning to stand watch all night?" Marcus inquired. Scout yawned, tail curling around himself. Marcus tossed him an old blanket, yet instead of lying there, the pup climbed up on the cot beside him. Marcus blinked a smile creeping in. "Oh, so you're that kind of Marine?" The pup circled once, then nestled in, resting his small head against Marcus's chest. The steady beat of his breathing filled the quiet room. Marcus sighed, half amused, half resigned. "All right, Scout, you've won." Outside, the wind picked up rattling window panes and howling through the trees. Somewhere down the road, a weathered flagpole groaned against its base. The lights flickered. Marcus lay back, the warmth of the pup's weight comforting against him. His hand rested gently on Scout's back, feeling each breath. For years, sleep had been a stranger. He had tried music pills' silence, but nothing could hush the echoes of war inside him. Yet now, with this small heartbeat pressed close to his chest, the turmoil within softened. He dreamed not of battlefields, but of pine forests and gentle rain. After midnight, a fierce gust flung open the cabin door. The hinges screamed as cold, damp air rushed in. Scout sprang upright, ears pricked instantly, leaping down, padding steadfast toward the noise. Marcus, groggy, stirred awake. "Easy," he murmured softly. "It's just the wind." Scout stood firm at the open doorway, tail still posture alert but fearless. Rain slanted through the threshold, pooling around his paws. Marcus rose, pulled the door closed, and crouched beside him. "You're not supposed to be the one guarding me," he said quietly. Scout looked up, eyes bright in the dim light. Then, as if satisfied, he trotted back to the cot and curled beside Marcus's boots again. When the storm finally passed, the base lay enveloped in the profound stillness that follows a long rain. The world felt washed clean, the air thick with the scent of earth and pine. Marcus lay awake a moment longer, listening to Scout's breath, the light twitch of paws in dreams. A smile spread as his eyes slowly closed again. For the first time in years, sleep came gently without a fight. By dawn, the storm had moved on. Clouds parted, spilling pale golden light across the treetops. Scout was already awake, sitting near the doortail, tapping softly. Marcus stretched, rubbing his face. "Looks like we're early risers now." Outside, the base began stirring to life. Voices, engines, the clatter of breakfast trays. Later that morning, Sarah passed by, spotting Marcus and Scout walking the perimeter trail. "Looks like you've created quite a shadow," she called out. Marcus glanced down at the pup trotting beside him. Tail held high steps, confident despite the healed leg. "He's earning his rank," Marcus answered. Sarah smiled warmly. Scout turned his head toward her, voice, ears twitching. His eyes caught the morning sunlight shining bright. For a fleeting moment, Marcus caught a glimpse of something deeply familiar, something unbreakable within him. As they crossed the training yard together, Scout paused by the flagpole, settling down, as his gaze fixed on the forest ridge, the very same place Marcus had first discovered him weeks ago. The wind softly tousled Scout's fur. Marcus knelt beside him, resting a steady hand on his neck. "You remember?" he murmured gently. "This is where it all began." Scout remained still, leaning slightly closer, pressing tenderly against Marcus's leg. That night, as the wind returned, the cabin door stayed firmly closed. Scout lay at the foot of the cot, calm, and no longer trembling, no longer searching. In the darkness, Marcus's hand found the pup's head, his fingers softly brushing through thick fur. "You're home now, Scout," he whispered for both of us. The oppressive afternoon heat draped heavily over Camp Valor, baking the rooftops and turning the air inside the storage hangars into a blazing furnace. It was late spring in Oregon, a dry, still day when even the wind seemed drained of strength. Beyond the base, the pines shimmered faintly, their needles sparkling beneath the hazy sky. For hours the camp had lain quiet, broken only by the steady mechanical hum of drills, the distant clang of tools, and the occasional bark of a dog. Marcus Hale worked at the far edge of the motor pool, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hands stained black with oil. Scout sat nearby on the concrete floor, tail wagging softly, eyes locked on him intently. The pup had matured, still just under 6 months old, but his limbs now stronger, his posture more assured. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, black and tan like whispers of smoke and earth. He carried himself with keen alertness, part discipline, part boundless curiosity. "Hold steady, buddy," Marcus said softly, lowering the wrench into the engine block of a Humvee. "Almost finished." Scout cocked his head at Marcus's voice, then stretched his legs as a low hum began to fill the air. Faint at first, then escalating in intensity. Marcus furrowed his brow, straightening up eyes, darting toward the direction of the fuel depot. The initial explosion was quiet, a metallic pop, followed by a thin plume of smoke curling beyond the fence line. Within moments, alarms shattered the stillness of the camp. A voice pierced through the loudspeaker's crackle. "Fire at the East Depot. All units respond immediately." Marcus dropped his wrench and seized his jacket. Scout let out a sharp bark, urgent and commanding. "Stay," Marcus ordered, but Scout's body tensed, coiled like a tightly wound wire. By the time Marcus reached the depot, thick black smoke billowed from one of the storage sheds, the acrid stench of burning fuel striking him fiercely. Flames hungrily licked the metal siding, and the air shimmered with searing heat. 2 Marines were already on scene, hauling fire extinguishers from a truck. Private Daniel Ruiz, a young recruit in his 20s with olive skin and cropped black hair, sprinted past Marcus carrying a hose reel. Though small, Daniel was wiry and relentless, the kind of soldier who grinned through mud and sweat. A thin brace wrapped his right wrist, a constant reminder of a training injury, yet to fully heal. "Sir, the generator inside shorted out," Daniel called out, breath ragged. "We think someone's trapped inside." Marcus's stomach tightened. "Who, Corporal Miller?" He went in to shut off the main fuel line. Before Marcus could respond, Scout defying orders slipped through the swelling crowd, nose raised to catch the scent. The pup barked once, then darted toward the roaring smoke. Scout Marcus shouted, chasing after him as the fiery heat struck his face like open hands. The fire devoured the outer wall, sending sparks scattering across the gravel like restless embers. Through the smoky veil, Marcus caught sight of Scout slipping through a crack in the doorway, vanishing inside. "Damn it!" Marcus yelled, pulling his sleeve over his mouth before lunging in after him. Inside, everything was painted in reds and suffocating smoke. Flames clung to the walls, their flickering glow casting shadows on the steel drums stacked in tight rows. The acrid stench of burning rubber and fuel gripped his lungs in a vice. From deeper within, the smoke, Scout's bark pierced the chaos, a frantic, echoing call. Marcus forced himself forward, eyes squinting against the blazing heat. The pup's silhouette flickered in the haze, small and swift. Then Marcus spotted it, a still figure lying on the floor, half smothered beneath a toppled shelf. "Scout, come back!" Marcus shouted, coughing harshly. But the puppy didn't obey. Instead, Scout gripped the man's sleeve in his teeth, growling sharply as though urging him to wake. The Marine Miller, barely more than a boy, remained motionless. Marcus dropped to his knees, clasped the unconscious soldier beneath the arms, and pulled with all his strength. His gloves hissed against the scorching metal. "Come on, kid, move!" Scout barked again, circling them, then seized Miller's jacket collar, tugging fiercely with taut muscles. Together they inched the limp body across the floor. Roaring flames pressed behind them, while a steel beam groaned ominously overhead, threatening to fall. They burst out through the doorway, just as the roof thundered down behind them. Marcus collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. Miller coughed weakly, soot smearing his face. Medics rushed forward, lifting the boy onto a stretcher. Among them was Sarah Collins, her uniform streaked with ash from aiding the first responders. Sweat glistened on her calm, resolute face, yet her gray eyes held steady. "He's alive," she declared, checking Miller's pulse. "Barely," Marcus said, turning to Scout. The pup's fur was singed at the edges, his paws blackened with soot, but his tail gave a slow, certain wag. His amber eyes met Marcus's, holding that unspoken bond. Then Sarah's voice cut through the quiet. "Hale, get that dog to the infirmary before he drops." Marcus nodded. "He's fine. He's burned, and you two are idiots." She snapped, but the edge softened in her voice. "You could have died in there." "Wouldn't be the first time," Marcus replied quietly. Sarah didn't argue. She just looked at Scout and shook her head. That's one hell of a team you've got there." Later, once the fire was snuffed and the smoke had thinned, Marcus sat outside the barracks under the cool night sky. The camp was silent, except for the soft chirp of crickets and the distant hum of generators. Scout lay beside him, a fresh bandage wrapped around one paw, a damp cloth soothing the singed fur on his back. "You broke a direct order," Marcus said gently, gazing down at him. Scout tilted his head, his eyes reflecting the muted light. Marcus smiled. "Guess I can't court-martial you for saving a life." A few Marines passed, chuckling quietly. Private Riker called out, "That little mutt's got more guts than half the unit." Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, they're already calling him the Little Marine." Marcus laughed softly, stroking Scout's head. "Hear that you've earned a title now?" Scout exhaled a gentle huff, nuzzling his head into Marcus's hand. After a long pause, Marcus murmured to himself, "No ranks for heroes, buddy. Just heart." The wind whispered softly through the pines, carrying the scent of ash and rain, a quiet testament to their unbreakable bond. Scout exhaled softly, resting his head gently against Marcus's palm. After a brief pause, Marcus murmured almost to himself, "No badges for heroes, just pure courage." The breeze whispered through the towering pines, bearing the faint aroma of ash and approaching rain. Scout's breathing deepened, slow and steady, his head resting gently on Marcus's boot. The fire was extinguished, yet its presence still lingered in the air. It wasn't the kind of fire that destroys, but one that reveals hidden truths. Marcus leaned back, his gaze fixed on the faint glow painting the horizon. "You're no longer just a survivor," he whispered softly. "You belong with us now." The wind began to stir, rising before sunset, carrying a restless murmur that swept across Camp Valor, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. The weather radios warned of a storm brewing from the coast, yet no one had foreseen it reaching this far inland. By evening, the Oregon sky had darkened into a bruised gray, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation, as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for something to shatter. Marcus Hale stood by the maintenance shed, eyes scanning the turbulent sky. Lightning danced on the horizon, sharp and silent at first, a harbinger of the rain to come. Beside him, Scout sat motionless, ears alert, nose lifted to meet the wind's message. The dog had grown lean and fierce in the weeks since the fire healed completely, save for a faint scar tracing his hind leg, a badge of survival and unwavering loyalty. "Storm's coming, buddy," Marcus murmured, pulling his jacket tight around him. "Let's get everyone safe inside before it hits." Across the field, Camp Valor bustled with urgency. Marines scrambled securing vehicles and gear under blinking floodlights as twilight deepened. Sergeant David Hull, commanding the K-9 unit, barked orders, his rough voice slicing through the rising wind. "Tie down the kennels. Don't leave a single one unlocked." Rain glistened on his weathered face, and the aged scar beneath his jaw caught each flash of lightning. Marcus joined him, fastening tarps over supply crates with rapid hands. Hull nodded appreciatively. "This one's going to be a fierce storm. Get Scout inside." "He hates thunder," Marcus replied quietly. Hull smiled briefly. "None of us do, Sergeant." As night fell, rain hammered down in relentless sheets. The tempest roared to life, first a distant rumble, then a deafening howl. Trees bowed beneath the hurricane winds, their shadows flitting wildly across the floodlights. Power flickered and died just past 9, plunging Camp Valor into blackness. Marcus retreated to his small cabin, a lantern's weak glow flickering on the table. Scout paced near the door, tail drooped low, unnerved by the thunder's growl. The wind screamed through every crack and crevice, rattling the tin roof overhead. Marcus knelt his hand, stroking Scout's back, steady and sure. "We'll get through this, like we always do." Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the night. The sound came from the kennels, a metallic groan followed by a strangled yelp. Marcus froze, recognizing the ominous noise of metal giving way. Snatching his flashlight, he yanked on his jacket and dashed into the storm. Rain lashed at his face like stinging shards of ice. The wind threatened to throw him sideways, but he pushed forward toward the training yard. His flashlight beam wavered through the sheets of rain. "Scout," he yelled, but the storm swallowed his voice. When he reached the kennels, his heart clenched. The outer roof had collapsed under the weight of a heavy branch. Steel framing twisted like fragile paper. Beneath the wreckage caught in the flicker of lightning, he glimpsed movement, a paw, then the unmistakable shape of Scout trapped beneath a crossbar. "Hold on, buddy," Marcus cried, tossing the flashlight aside. He crawled into the ruin mud, clinging to his boots, water pooling over his knees. Scout whimpered once, struggling desperately beneath the debris. He edged cautiously into the debris, the mud gripping his boots tightly as water collected at his knees. Scout let out a plaintive whimper, struggling ahead. His eyes were wide, yet clear and determined. Marcus gripped the beam tightly. It was heavier than it appeared, soaked and cold, half buried beneath the debris. "Come on," he murmured through clenched teeth, bracing his shoulder against the frame and straining. The beam shifted an inch, then stubbornly settled back in place. "Don't give up on me," he gasped, gathering strength for a second push, bursting with a grunt and a curse. He pushed until his muscles screamed, until the rain blurred the edges of his world. Finally, the beam lifted just enough for Scout to slip free, his body slick with mud. Marcus stumbled backward into the water, pulling the dog into his arms. Scout's chest rose and fell, fast, desperate. Blood stained his side surface wounds, but it glowed vivid against his fur. Marcus pressed his palm against it, feeling the steady thump beneath. "You're going to be okay," he said, voice trembling. "You're okay." The pup shivered violently, licking his chin in quick, frantic motions. The small gesture carried a powerful message. "I'm here." Marcus rose, cradling Scout close to his chest. The familiar weight grounded him. Each step through the storm, unlocking memories. Unbidden. Other tempests, other long nights. The sandstorms of Afghanistan. The acrid scent of gunpowder and flame. The heaviness of Valor's lifeless body in his arms. For years he had carried that silence alone. But now, amid the thunder and pouring rain, something inside him cracked open. He reached the field tent near the mess hall, an old supply shelter saved for emergencies. Inside, the air was cold and damp, yet mercifully dry. He laid Scout on a mound of blankets and fired up a small camp stove. The dog curled tightly, trembling but alive. Marcus rubbed him gently with a towel, whispering through the rumbles of thunder. "You reckless little thing. You just had to run into that mess, didn't you?" Scout blinked at him, ears back, tail thumping once like a quiet apology. "Yeah," Marcus murmured. "You and me both." He poured water into a canteen lid and set it beside his friend, then sank down beside him, back against the tent wall. Outside, wind howled and whipped the canvas with every gust. Water seeped through the seams, tracing thin paths down the fabric. Moments later, Lieutenant Sarah Collins appeared at the tent's entrance, soaked to the bone, clutching a first aid kit. Her usually composed face was tight with anxiety. "I heard shouting," she said. "Got him out before the frame collapsed," Marcus replied. She crouched next to Scout, her wet hair plastered against her forehead. Her hands moved swiftly, yet gently examining his leg, pressing lightly against his ribs. "He's lucky no fractures, just cuts." She glanced up at Marcus with concern. "And you?" He gave a faint smile. "A few bruises. Nothing I haven't seen before." Sarah exhaled deeply, settling back on her heels. "You two seem to attract trouble like it's your calling. That's what happens when you run with Marines," he said. Despite the storm's fury outside, a brief, genuine laugh escaped her lips. She draped a blanket over Scout and rose. "Keep him warm. He's in shock." "I will," Marcus answered. Sarah hesitated a moment, her gray eyes softening as she studied them both. "You know," she said quietly, "some people spend their entire lives searching for loyalty like that. Don't ever take it for granted." And then she was gone, her figure swallowed by the pouring rain. Marcus leaned his head back, listening to the storm's roar beyond the canvas. The camp was swallowed in darkness, nothing but noise. Yet inside that small, fragile tent, a quiet peace lingered, the warmth of steady breathing, a reminder of survival. The soft crackle of the stove whispered in the quiet night, a steady heartbeat of two survivors sharing a sacred silence. Scout shifted closer, pressing firmly against Marcus's side. His fur was damp, yet his pulse was steady and strong. Marcus laid a hand gently on Scout's head, closing his eyes to the moment. Outside, thunder roared across the valley like distant cannons. Inside, Marcus found the first true calm he'd known in what felt like forever. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was low, nearly swallowed by the howling wind. "You're not just a loyal dog, Scout. You're the living proof that something in me still holds strong." Scout let out a soft, contented sigh, curling back into rest. The storm raged fiercely until dawn, yet neither of them stirred. By morning, the camp was battered but unbroken. The trees glistened silver beneath the pale light, and smoke spiraled from the charred remains of a shattered fence. Inside the tent, Marcus sat quietly watching the first sunbeams break through heavy clouds. Scout lay sleeping beside him, chest rising and falling with steady breath. A gentle smile crossed Marcus's face as he whispered, "We made it." For the very first time in years, his thoughts didn't dwell on war loss or what had been left behind. Instead, he treasured what he had found, the simple, miraculous gift of still being here to feel it. The storm passed, yet its echo clung to the air. For days, Camp Valor smelled of wet, pine-rusted metal and smoke lingering from the burn pits where debris was cleared. The pines casting shadows along the base sparkled, freshly cleansed in the gentle Oregon light, their needles shimmering with the soft glow left by the rain. The atmosphere softened quieter now, as if the storm had swept away a heavy burden and left behind an unusual peace. Marcus Hale awoke early before dawn, as always. The horizon blazed faintly silver against the morning sky, while the camp still slumbered under a misty veil. At his side, Scout stirred, stretching wide, yawning deeply, his tail thumping softly against the wooden floor. The pup was growing fast, muscles firm beneath his tan and black coat eyes, shining bright, with the fearless confidence of one who had survived. Marcus knelt, clipping a tag onto Scout's collar. "All right, Sergeant Shadow," he murmured. "Time to do our rounds." It all began by chance. The morning after the storm's fury, Marcus had circled the camp's perimeter, checking for damage with Scout trailing quietly and watchfully. At each row of barracks, the dog would pause, sniff the air deeply, then bark once sharply before moving on. That routine stuck, becoming the rhythm of their mornings. At dawn, Scout inspected each building as if it were his solemn duty. Calm, focused, methodical. By the fourth day, everyone at camp had noticed. Morning patrol again. Sergeant David Holt called from the K9 yard, his deep voice carrying over the gravel. He stood clutching a mug of coffee, his uniform neat despite the early hour, a faint smile softening the hard lines of his face. "Wouldn't dream of missing it," Marcus answered quietly. Private Daniel Ruiz, the young mechanic sporting a wrist brace, leaned out from under a jeep he was fixing. "He does this every single morning, huh? Same time, same route," Marcus confirmed. Daniel laughed. "We should make him a rank pin. Call him Sergeant Checkup." By noon, the nickname had spread through camp like wildfire. By week's end, half the Marines were saluting the dog with playful mock respect. Scout, unaware of the joke, took each salute seriously, tail held high, chest puffed out proudly, eyes sharp and scanning, as if he truly understood the weight behind their humor. Sarah Collins, the base vet, observed this ritual one morning while filing reports. Standing in the shade outside her clinic, clipboard tucked under one arm, observing the quiet ceremony one morning while cataloging reports. She lingered in the cool shade outside her clinic, clipboard tucked securely beneath her arm. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose bun, softened by the damp air around her. Her stance remained calm and purposeful, shaped by countless steady hands and the unyielding discipline of the field, yet the faint shadows beneath her eyes revealed many sleepless nights. She had witnessed too many animals pass through her care, only to never leave again. But Scout was different. "He's something special," she said as Marcus drew near. "You know he's checking on the new recruits' quarters, too. I saw him sitting outside one door until the light finally flickered on inside. He wouldn't budge until then." Marcus smiled. "He just wants to make sure everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be." Sarah tilted her head, her look softening. "Ever wonder if he picked that up from you?" Marcus studied her for a moment, caught off guard. Then he shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I learned it from him." She offered a subtle smile before turning back to her reports. Still, Marcus caught the warm flicker in her eyes, the quiet bond between two souls who truly understood what it meant to nurture and protect life. The camp found its steady rhythm again. Training drills resumed, trucks rumbled over the gravel, and the familiar scents of engine oil and strong black coffee returned each morning. Yet the silence between Marcus and Scout had deepened, built on an unspoken language of routine and unwavering trust. At mealtime, Scout settled beneath the mess hall bench, his tail brushing Marcus's boots, not begging, but always vigilant. During night drills, when Marcus stood sentinel beside the fence line, Scout waited quietly at his side, amber eyes glowing faintly beneath the harsh floodlights. Scout had grown into a steadfast presence amid a world defined by chaos. One afternoon, as the sun slowly dipped behind the cascades, Marcus found himself perched on the barracks steps. Scout stretched out beside him, nestled in the golden hues of dusk. The clouds burned orange and violet along their edges. The evening breeze carried the sounds of distant laughter from the mess hall, the clang of dishes, the quiet hum of weary men finding solace in routine. Marcus leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, watching the horizon darken. Scout laid his head gently against his boot. "You and me, Scout," Marcus murmured. "Two survivors just learning to live." Scout's ears flicked as if he understood. He turned his head, pressing his muzzle softly against Marcus's leg. It was a small but meaningful gesture, a silent affirmation. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a rough dog tag he'd been crafting, a scrap of aluminum carefully etched with a pocket knife. The words he'd just spoken were etched there. He fastened the tag to the pup's collar, the metal catching the last light of day. "There," Marcus said. "Now it's official." The sound of boots crunching echoed behind them. Holt approached, casual hands tucked in his pockets. He looked from Marcus to the dog and nodded. "You've done right by him," he said. Marcus smiled softly. "He pretty much trained himself." "Maybe," Holt replied. "But he reflects you. That kind of steadiness dogs don't fake it." For a moment, all was quiet. The sky deepened to a deep blue. Somewhere across camp, a bugle called the evening assembly. Holt adjusted his cap. "When you're out, Hale, after all this is done, ever think about what's next?" Marcus glanced down at Scout, whose tail flicked lazily in the dust. "Maybe I've already found it." Holt smiled, then headed toward the K9 quarters. The silence that lingered after wasn't heavy. The night settled over them, a serene silence earned through hardship. Marcus remained seated until the final flicker of daylight vanished into the dark. The world around him narrowed to the steady ebb and flow of Scout's breathing at his side. Sleep eluded Marcus that night. The storm had long passed, But within his chest, an unease awakened a stirring sense that this chapter of his life was nearing its close. For over 10 years he had walked the path of a Marine, his existence marked by deployment's commands, and the lingering quiet that followed every mission. Yet here alongside Scout, the rigid weight of duty began to soften into something more profound. Outside, the camp lay still, broken only by the faint glow of a distant lantern. Marcus stood by the doorway, gazing out while Scout pressed gently against his leg. "You're up too, huh?" Marcus whispered softly. He crouched down, running his hand lovingly through the dog's coat. "We don't know what tomorrow holds, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." Scout cocked his head in quiet agreement, then nudged Marcus's palm with his nose. In that timeless moment, Marcus realized how remarkable it was that a life forged in discipline and solitude could find new meaning in something so silent, so unspoken. Their bond wasn't born from orders or obligations, but from the tender spaces in between the shared dawns, the long quiet walks, the unwavering loyalty that required no words. He released a slow breath, the tension melting away. "Get some rest, Sergeant. We've got a checkup tomorrow," he said with a soft smile. "Another inspection coming." Scout curled up on the floor, exhaling in peaceful surrender. Marcus reclined on his cot. The storm outside had faded into a distant memory, replaced by something genuine and new. The rain returned to Oregon, with its gentle relentlessness soft but unending. Camp Valor was slick with mud and shrouded in fog, the towering pines bowing under a slate-gray sky that refused to lift. Training pressed on no matter the weather. Marines marched through puddles, their boots sinking deep into the softened earth, breath visible in the cold air. Marcus Hale was among them, unwavering as ever, though a dull ache in his bones had crept in since morning, a silent warning he chose to ignore. The day stretched on with rigorous drills, survival practice, and preparations in the field. By afternoon, his uniform clung to his skin, soaked through and heavy. Even Scout, normally a restless shadow bounding through puddles, trudged slower, his tail hanging low. When Marcus knelt to refill his canteen, a shiver ran deep through him. He shrugged it off, tightening his jacket against the chill. "Hang in there, buddy. Just a little longer." As night descended, the wind sharpened, slicing through the camp with a biting edge. Inside his cabin, the air felt colder than outside. He dropped his pack. Muscles aching, head spinning, Scout sat nearby. Eyes fixed on him, fur bristling, faintly alert to the change. Marcus sank onto his cot, drawing the blanket tight around his shoulders. The lantern's glow flickered weakly, while outside rain transformed into sleet, tapping unevenly against the roof. Scout whimpered softly, pacing, then nudged Marcus's knee. "I'm fine," Marcus murmured, voice heavy with fatigue. But nothing was fine. The fever that had come on slow since afternoon now surged in waves, blurring the edges of his vision. His skin burned with heat, even as a relentless chill shivered through him. Scout pressed closer, restless and watchful. Marcus's breathing grew shallow and uneven, a sound foreign to the dog's ears. Time slipped away as the wind howled through every crack and crevice. Scout's ears twitched with each gust, yet his gaze never wavered from Marcus. The Marine lay still, his face drained of color, caught between the fading light and a darkening shadow that neither would surrender. His lips dry and pulse fluttering, his body shuddered once before going limp. The dog let out a sharp